Of Black America. Black history, lost, stolen, or strayed.
No, I could never fit in that. Never get in that at all. This is more like it. Now, what's the whitest thing you know? Whiter than the driven snow, whiter than the whites of your eyes? Sugar. Non-integrated, non-black, sweet sugar. But you see, there is a black man in your sugar. His name is Norbert Rillier. Norbert Rillier in 1846 invented a vacuum pan, revolutionized the sugar refining industry. Now, you have to dig to find that fact. I mean, it's not much history, but it's still history. Now, what do you stand in? In your shoes. Now, there's just you and your shoes, isn't it? Nope. See, there's a black man standing in your Oxfords with you. Sharing your soul and your heel is a man, his name is Jan Ernst Metzelger. And in 1863, this is a drawing by the kids, Metzelger invented the machine that made mass-produced shoes possible. Now, you have to dig around for that fact, too. And again, it's not much history, but it's history. Am I coming in clear to California? I mean, is this TV signal driving through a pass in the Sierra Nevada mountains and slipping into San Francisco? Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Jim Beckworth. Jim Beckworth out of St. Louis, hunter, trapper, and honorary chief of the Crow tribe of Indians. We had trouble finding you, Jim. Though you helped open the West, you didn't make the books. Chicago, right here, where the Wrigley building is. Young fellow by the name of Jean-Baptiste de Sable. Jean-Baptiste, he founded Chicago, when he traded with the Indians. And of course, there it is right at that particular time. It was called Chicago, or Stinking Onion, by the Indians. And de Sable, he didn't even change the name at all. Now you take the Lewis and Clark expedition here, right in there. You'll find a black man named York, helping to open the West. Those men are trying to wash the black out of York. That's what you might call historically significant, because a lot of people think we ought to wash white, but we ain't gonna, you see. Texas. Coming to you, Texas, right down the Chisholm Trail, right here. Right down there with 5,000 black cowboys who never made it to the Hollywood Western. Did you know that, huh? In the same group, there was one black outlaw. His name was Deadwood Dick, who claimed his soul brothers were Bat Masterson, Billy the Kid, and Jesse James. Deadwood Dick used to ride into the saloon, order 2 drinks, one for himself and one for his horse. And here's his horse drinking a shot of red-eye with a straw. And how about the 186,000 blacks who fought on the Union side during the Civil War? 38,000 died. How about Teddy Roosevelt's charge up San Juan Hill? It wasn't just the Rough Riders who made it. 4 black regiments went right up with Teddy. They didn't get lost going up the hill. They got lost in the history books. How about the North Pole? Snow White? Well, the first man there was black, Matthew Henson. He spoke Eskimo. And he was Admiral Perry's navigator. And although he made it first to the pole, it never quite made it to the history books. And how about your heart? Can we get there? All right. Daniel Hale Williams first performed open heart surgery successfully. Now, this list could go on forever. Blacks who made it, blacks who made history, but who didn't get into the history text at all. And the strange thing is how little there is about us in the textbooks. Napoleon once said, history is a fable agreed upon, and the fable agreed upon up to now is that American history is white on white. But sometimes we did get into the history books. All wrong. Now you take this one. The Growth of the American Republic, 1942 edition. Samuel Eliot Morrison, Henry Steele Commager. Quote, as for. This has to do with slavery. As for Sambo, Professor Morrison. Sambo, Professor Commager. As for Sambo, whose wrongs moved the abolitionists to wrath and tears, there is some reason to believe that he suffered less than any other class in the South from its peculiar institution. Peculiar institution means slavery. Although brought to America by force, the incurably optimistic Negro soon became attached to the country and devoted to his white folks, unquote. Those lines were written by 2 Pulitzer Prize-winning white Northern professors. Slavery. That's the place everybody likes to start Negro history. You have ignorant black men being brought over from Africa in chains. Terrible thing, slavery. But this way slavery is taught, it sort of takes the sting out of it. Because the way it's usually taught, people think that we Afro-Americans started with nothing but little grass skirts like the cats in the Tarzan movies. And though America gave us slavery, America kindly gave us religion and a lick or two of education. And when we get more jobs and more education, then up from slavery. But we had something before we left Africa, something more than rhythm. I mean, we had a high culture. Culture was so high that great artists in the world are still borrowing from it. Now here's a sculpture by an unknown African artist. And here's what Paul Klee took from him. Now here's a work by an unknown black African, and Pablo Picasso liked what he saw. Another African design, and Modigliani swiped it, or he was influenced by it, or whatever polite word you want to use. Another black African artist, and Picasso didn't change it very much. I mean, when you look at this copy, you got to give us a little more than rhythm. You got to give us style. Now, if you tell the history of slavery right, you got a big problem on your hands. The slave trader didn't take some savage out of Africa. He took a human being. He sold him like an animal and separated him from his family. America invented the cruelest slavery in the history of the world because it broke up black families. After slavery was over, America kept breaking up the black man's family. And that's some awful history to teach. Now, if you want to look history right straight in the eye, you're going to get a black eye. Because it isn't important whether a few black heroes got lost or stolen or strayed in America's history textbooks. What's important is why they got left out. Now, this country has got a psychological history. There was a master race, there was a slave race. And though there isn't any political slavery anymore, those same old attitudes have hung around. I mean, the burning part of Burn, Baby Burn is right here in this classroom. We want to thank Mrs. Lovely Billups and the whole gang here at the 4th grade for the brilliant and intelligent artwork that they've done here to make this whole broadcast sing. I want you guys to keep pretending that I'm not here. You're doing a great job, and just keep on drawing and reading and writing, doing what you have to do, because I'm going to talk about some other kids. Not you, Mary, John, and Bob. These are kids from other schools. Did you know in some states it used to be against the law to teach blacks to read or write? Nowadays, we're getting these integrated schoolrooms, and most people think that if we get enough teaching and enough jobs, everything is going to take care of itself. But there is a scar of history running right through kids as young as these. It tears you up if you know how to look at drawings kids make, because kids shouldn't know much about history and anything about discrimination. I mean, nobody hates little black kids, but why do some of them cause so much trouble? And if you ask black and white children to draw themselves, or trees, or houses, some strange things happen. We asked some ordinary white kids from ordinary families to make some drawings for us. Like, well, let's call him John. John's white, and we asked him to draw himself. This is John. This is his house, and this is his tree. Then we asked a black kid, let's call him Ralph, to do the same thing. This is Ralph's drawing of himself. This is his tree. Now, why should two kids of the same age draw so differently? Enter the expert. This is Dr. Emmanuel Hammer, psychiatrist specializing in children's therapy.
Well, let me illustrate it for you. Let's take these drawings.
No matter what a child draws, he's really picturing himself. Ask a secure child to draw a tree, and he's likely to draw a bountiful, spreading tree. A black child drew this tree, cut off in its growth, stark, bare, ungratified. It works the same way with drawings of people. Normal children, average drawings. The mood is happy, the child feels capable, the drawings are complete, and the arms are developed to emphasize strength. These children were old enough to draw complete figures. The significant fact is what they left out. Arms, hands. A child may sense that a situation in life is so powerless that he himself is equivalent to an armless man. My own study reveals that armless people appear 3 times more frequently in the drawings by black children than those by white. The faceless beings suggest that these youngsters not only feel themselves to be less than they might be, they don't even feel themselves to be. The black child who is forced to live in a hostile world may disappear in self-defense. He drifts through life feeling like a shadow. He stops caring, and he stops trying. A child who has this on his mind cannot be a child. A child who has this on his mind could want to burn down cities when he gets older.
The whole confusion was summed up by a black 9-year-old in these 2 paintings. This is a 9-year-old boy draws a white man, Robin Hood maybe. And this is how the same boy draws himself. And this is the consequence of deformed history.
Linda, close the curtains. Brian, lower the screen. Bonnie, lights, please.
In the past 50 years, 33,000 feature films have been made in the United States, and about 6,000 of them have had parts for black actors. For the most part, the black portraits have been drawn by white writers, white producers, and white directors for a white audience. Most black parts were the way white Americans wanted them to be. The black male was consistently shown as nobody, nothing. He had no qualities that could be admired by any man, or more particularly, any woman.
When the sun goes down, the tide goes down, the doctors gather around and they all begin to shout, hey, hey, Uncle Doug is free.
White people didn't like to think much about them. Sort of like a relative you got in a rest home. I mean, happy darkies, dancing and singing was all they wanted to hear about. Being good Christians, the whites out front liked to think the blacks out back were kind of happy. Uncle Tom's Cabin was one of the first movies made that tried to say anything about black people. Uncle Tom was changed a little each time it was put on the stage, and all the parts were played by white actors, and by the time they made a movie of it in 1903, Uncle Tom was just the white man's idea of a good nigger. You might say he was what H. Rap Brown ain't. They made this picture 5 times. By the time they finished with it, Mickey Rooney could have played Uncle Tom. Minstrel shows started as the black man's entertainment for himself and the plantation owners. When they were filmed, though, they were done by a white cast. You figure that out. They were done as sort of a joke, and the black entertainer couldn't even get a job making fun of himself. The first really vicious anti-Negro film was called The Birth of a Nation, and it was a honey. And the second worst thing about it was that technically, in 1918, it was the best movie that had ever been made. A cat named D.W. Griffith produced it, and he knew how. See? Birth of a Nation pretended to tell the story of the Civil War and what happened afterwards when the slaves were freed. White women couldn't walk on her own sidewalk, if you believe the picture. In the South, Negroes got the right to vote, and the movie showed black vote collectors refusing to accept white votes, and black people sneaking in extra votes. And if these black bad guys don't look very bad to you, it's probably because they were white actors wearing burnt cork. Negro legislators took over in the South, and in the film they were made to look like apes. And this was the movie version of how it looked in the Southern state legislature. They drank whiskey, they ate chicken with their hands in the State House, and they put their feet up on the table with their shoes off. And of course, they passed all sorts of crazy laws according to the film, like anybody could marry anybody they wanted to. It was obvious to anyone who saw this picture that Negroes weren't fit to govern themselves or anyone else because they really weren't people. This film is 50 years old, and it may look silly and out of date now, but it didn't look silly when it was made seen. Several million Americans who saw it were propagandized to believe that this is the way things would be if they weren't careful. So they've been pretty careful. Colonel Cameron, a former officer in the Confederate Army, is all upset over the way Northerners and the freed slaves are changing his South, taking a mint julep right out of his mouth. So he takes a walk one day while he's worrying about it, and he sees 2 white kids playing, and then 4 black kids come along. Being hardly human and naturally afraid of ghosts, the black kids run. Colonel Cameron sees the whole scene, gets his great idea, and with this, that great white all-American organization, the KKK, was born. Cavalry in the bedsheet has come to the rescue. The South is saved. In this picture, the Ku Klux Klan was the good boy who saved the South. Most Hollywood films, though, even the early ones, weren't really nasty. Nobody was sitting around saying, hey, let's take care of the niggers. What producers were doing was making money. And to make money, they made pictures that white ticket buyers would enjoy. They showed Negroes the way most Americans like to think of them. To blame Hollywood is like throwing a rock at the mirror because you don't like what you see in it. Burt Williams was one of the great vaudeville performers. He couldn't get parts in white pictures, so he made a lot of short comedies. He played the part most Americans consider typical Negro. He wasn't bad, really, just lazy, stupid, and happy the way he was. And his feet hurt. He was afraid of most everything. And when he was scared, he shook and his teeth chattered. Unlike a scared white man, the black man's eyes could pop out of his head. And when he was scared, he was so scared he couldn't talk. And he was also so scared he couldn't run. Black women, on the other hand, were steady and imperturbable. They stood like a rock on the face of things that scared black men. Another strange physical characteristic was when they were really very scared, the guys turned white. When you look back on these old films, the patterns come jumping out at you. The most consistent thing about them was the attack on the black man. He was never even given the privilege of being a man. He was a boy, as in, you know, here, boy. They had a lot of other great qualities besides being cowardly. For instance, they stole chickens.
Who's in there? Who's in there? Ain't nobody in here but us chickens.
They shot craps.
Dice, your papa talking to you now, Dice. Come on. Just hit it one more time.
And lions weren't the only thing they were afraid of either. They were afraid of gorillas.
Wonderful. Is that you next to me? Wonderful. Is that you next? Now, come on, Wonderful. Now, don't start arguing. Come on, tell me the truth. Is that you next to me? Wonderful, please say yes, that's you.
They were also afraid of ghosts and skeletons.
Jeff? Is that you scratching my head? Jeff? Jeff! Now, come on, now, what are you looking at?
What's your hurry, boys?
Even when they were little boys, they had these characteristics. Farina in our gang was the boy. The tradition of the lazy, stupid, crap-shooting, chicken-stealing idiot was popularized by an actor named Lincoln Theodore Monroe Andrew Perry. Cat made $2 million in 5 years in the middle 30s, and everyone who ever saw a movie laughed at Steppin' Fetchit.
Come out, wherever you is, wherever you be, wherever you do. Come out, wherever you am. How's the government looking for you? Where you going, stranger? You scare somebody stiff like that. I'm looking for hillbillies as you was. I ain't saying I am, I ain't saying I ain't. Well, that's close enough for me, because I'm tired of walking myself. The government told me I got to bring in a hillbilly, so you come go with me to Washington. I ain't a-going. That's the color of another horse. Well, I tell you, you don't go for me. We go for the Navy. No! I go for the Navy. Well, I tell you, go for the Army. No, I won't go for the Army.
It's too bad he was as good at it as he was. The character he played was planted in a lot of people's head, and they remember it the rest of their lives as clear as an auto accident.
What's that? Are you an Indian? Yes, I'm Indian. Man, you don't know. I'm Indian. I got 1/4 the Cherokee, 2/4 Seminole, and I got 4/5 Hiawatha. Wait a minute. Hiawatha was a woman. I can't help it. I got 4/5 of her.
He played in movies with other actors who were as American as Mom's raspberry jello. If they accepted the stereotype, how wrong could it be?
Mr. Judge Riggin, can I see you some, please?
Well, I'm pretty busy.
Yes, but I just want to ask if you heard about it.
Hear about what?
About over at my house, night before last.
Oh, another baby?
Yes, you sure guessed that you heard.
What's his name?
Oh, we call him L.R. Elias Rigby Livingston.
Oh, named him after me, did you?
Yes, Elias Rigby. I told my wife, Ethel, I said, honey, I know Judge sure gonna be gratified.
Well, of course, yes, I appreciate the honor.
Yes, sir.
I suppose a compliment, and I ought to do something for you.
Yes, sir, that's what I thought.
You come over to my place tomorrow, and I'll give you a job.
Job?
Raking leaves.
I asked him to wait.
All-American little Shirley Temple played a lot of parts that involved her with black actors. She was always real nice to them.
Oh, James Henry, you always do it wrong.
This is an imitation Step and Fetch It named Willie Best with Shirley.
Come on, Miss Virgie. I just won't budge. I'll show them I'm not
The cute little white girl was brave and strong in the face of danger, and the big black man was stupid and cowardly.
What are you afraid of them for?
Oh, honey, child, them Yankees is mighty powerful. They can even change the weather.
Yes?
Whenever they come around, I never know whether it's winter or summer. I'm shivering and sweating at the same time.
James Henry, serve these cookies to Master Harold and wipe his chin.
Yes, ma'am, Miss Virgie.
She was good to them, and they were good to her. Sort of a master and pet relationship.
How would you like to see Uncle Billy dance?
All right, James Henry, let's get going, son.
This is Bill Bojangles Robinson, one of the great ones. But if he wanted to work and dance, he had to come into a picture through the servants' entrance. Shirley was good to children, too. They loved their little mistress, and she treated them real good,
Hello, Sally Ann.
just like they were equals.
Go on now, Sally Ann. Miss Virgie, please, ma'am. We all done come here to wish you many happy
returns.
That's it, many happy returns of the day. And we all done made you a darling. Here it is. Miss Virgie, there was more I had to say, but Emmy, I forgot it.
You said everything, Sally Ann. Don't you worry. This is the very nicest present I got. Thank you ever so much.
Yes, indeed, children. It was very thoughtful and sweet. Come now, dear.
I'll see you later, and I'll save you some cake. We'll be waiting.
I suppose it might have surprised a lot of Hollywood writers and producers to know a scene like that could actually make a lot of people, mostly black, sick to their stomach. This is a lot of fun, isn't it? The newsreels that were shown along with feature films knew a good thing when they saw one. They helped keep all the black cats in their place. Nobody black ever did anything very newsy in a newsreel. They did things like eat watermelon in watermelon eating contests. Then another favorite for the newsreel cameraman was to film people throwing things at them. Good sport. Some college football publicity man decided this was a good idea. And there were a lot of very funny golf pictures. If you weren't black, they were funny, I guess.
Lie down. Just right out of your mouth.
Don't miss, boss, don't miss.
Well, you keep still, see? Otherwise, you'll have flour in your room and you won't smell them. Oh, boy. Oh, wait.
Everything suggested the black man was nothing. Hollywood adopted a sort of British attitude toward black natives of other countries. They were always sneaking around the bushes, you know, carrying stuff on their head. White men weren't supposed to get caught sweating. Ann Harding played a scene in a picture called Prestige, and it stated the colonial attitude.
Don't let it break, Andre. Take to him your race for a wedding gift. The prestige of the white man. That means everything you stand for. And it is the only weapon you two will have. Prestige. But it is enough to preserve you.
Yes, sir. And I'll try to remember it. If you'll kiss me.
Even though most non-white natives of any place were savages in films, it often pleased white producers to endow a few chosen blacks with the virtue of great loyalty to him, the white man. Here's one defending Anne Harding to the death. There was always one loyal and true black man who would do anything for his master. Some of them were wonderful people. You know, if you really get a good one. Mostly, though, Negroes were not heroes. They were a bit part servants, railroad porters.
Watch your steps. Watch your steps, sir. Well, this is your destination, folks.
They made very good chauffeurs. Looked good in their caps.
Good morning, Colonel, sir.
And they were great at serving all kinds of drinks.
That cough of yours stays with you like poor relation.
What's that you got there, Libby?
Your sassafras tea.
Wherever there was a thirsty master, there were they also.
Mom, Beck.
Glad Aunt Jemima.
Will you have enough?
I don't know if I can stretch one small chicken, but as long as the water's running, we'll have soup enough.
Lottie, will you take Kay upstairs and wash all that goo off her face and give her a good...
And one question they never answered. When the Negro woman was taking care of the white woman's kids, who was taking care of hers? They did all kinds of odd jobs around the picture, like walking horses. When they weren't walking the horses, they were out back playing craps, of course. Recreation. They met people at the station for their masters.
Is you folks,
We've come all the way from Ireland. Mr. Milford's expecting us. Mr. Milford.
Yes'm, you is which I'm looking for. I'm Mr. Milford's boy.
His boy, you say?
Yes, sir. Murphy's the name, sir.
Did you say Murphy?
Yes, Mrs. Murphy. They calls me Walking Murphy.
Walking Murphy?
Yes, sir. Most of us Murphys down here just sit. I walk.
They make wonderful servants, all kinds in pictures. Dumb but loyal.
Jacques, isn't it a beautiful night? I just love parties, don't you?
I beg your pardon?
Thank you kindly. Yes? Hello? Oh, this is Berrigan residence.
Now, things were getting pretty tough during the 30s. And a good thing for a lot of black actors was that they made a movie called The Green Pastures with, like they say, a cast of thousands. It gave a lot of people work, but it had all the old stereotyped characters. It was clever and funny and all black. But it was a white man's picture.
I'm the Indian.
Henry, you sure got the prettiest wings.
Oh, they're just my old ones.
Cigars, gentlemen, cigars. Yes, sir. Cigars, gentlemen, cigars.
Oh, Lord, the smokehouse is empty. Oh, Lord, let me get them groceries. Oh, Lord, let me see that little six. Where? Come on, you gonna feed me or not? Hey!
Well, you just a little boy, gambling and sinning, and doing tobacco like you was your own pappy. And you've been drinking Sonny Kick Mammy wine, too. You gamblers ought to be ashamed of yourself leading this boy to sin.
Well, he's the best crapshoot in town.
You find my mammy, do more than I can.
While Hollywood was turning out films, radio came along and decided to get in on it, too. Two white fellows from Chicago invented two black characters they named Amos and Andy. They played their parts on the radio for 30 years. This is them doing their bit.
Well, Brother Crawford looks pretty good since he's been here at Palm Springs, don't he? Yeah, looks like his wife done beat him on the...
When radio moved over to let television in, Amos and Andy went with it. These two white cats couldn't play Amos and Andy where you could see them, so what they did was they had a black cast. The cast was different, but the stereotypes were the ones the white people had come to know and love. They were shady characters with money.
Well, I got the books right here, and they're open to each and every brother complete inspection. Get your hands off of that thing there. So you want to see the financial books, huh?
Yeah.
Well, there he is. There he is. You done see them. The meeting's adjourned.
They were still slow and lazy.
Are you sure they are not here?
Oh, yes, they told me so themselves.
Have them report to our office right away.
I sure tell them, all right. I got to see.
They had trouble with the English language. Misused words a lot.
And Mr. Brown, my new secretary here, ain't gonna have no time for no extracurricular activities.
And I'm telling you now, as long as you have that secretary in your office, I'm going to work as a secretary myself.
Oh, give me an ultimatum, huh? I'm putting my foot down.
They had trouble with women. And it was always the women who were dominant.
Come on, Herman.
Mostly black actors aren't playing the old stereotypes anymore. There are people who say they're playing a new stereotype. Sidney Poitier is always helping some little old ladies across the street, whether they want to go or not. The black people in this country got a bum deal for a long while, and it won't hurt much if we see a little of that now and then. Stanley Kramer has let us use some scenes from Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. You look at these and remember Birth of a Nation. This is the opening scene when Catherine Hutton is bringing Sidney home for the first time.
This is Dr. Prentice, John, Miss Matilda Binks.
Pleased to meet you, Miss Binks. I've certainly heard a great deal about you.
Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy are the girl's parents.
Thank God he's right. She's 23 years old, and the way she is just exactly the way we brought her up to be. We answered her questions. She listened to our answers. We told her it was wrong to believe that the white people were somehow essentially superior to the black people, or the brown or the red or the yellow ones, for that matter. People who thought that way were wrong to think that way. Sometimes hateful, usually stupid, but always, always wrong. That's what we said. And when we said it, we did not add, but don't ever fall in love with a colored man.
Sidney tells it like it is to his old man.
You and your whole lousy generation believes the way it was for you is the way it's got to be. And not until your whole generation has lain down and died will the dead weight of you be off our backs. You understand? You've got to get off my back. Dad. You're my father. I'm your son. I love you. I always have, and I always will. But you think of yourself as a colored man. I think of myself as a man.
By the time the world of movies and the world of education get into the streets of black America, some strange things happen. Because what history and the movies have told the black man is that he's nobody unless he joins the white world.
The white world only comes into the black ghetto by messenger. The message used to read, black is nothing, white is beautiful. For this reason, a lot of black people have spent their lives trying to be white. For instance, hair. Some people still call straight hair good hair because it looks like white hair. Kinky hair is bad hair. The man on the right is having his hair cut naturally. The man on the left is having a process. What the barber is doing is applying harsh chemicals to his head so he'll have straight hair like all those movie stars have. It's a painful, long job that costs about $6 and has to be looked after every couple of weeks. These days, many young black men find the whole process demeaning. It's going out of fashion, even in the ghetto. It takes pain to become like a white man, and more pain when you know you can't make it. For a while, it seemed to the black community that the way to escape was to get as rich as possible and look as white as possible. And as affluence came to some black people, all the lessons of history and all the lessons of the movie seemed to be succeed on the white man's terms. So, the middle-class Negro took the white man's dreams and tried to make them his. Today, many middle-class Negroes have the education and the money to provide themselves with all the white man's dreams but one: universal social acceptability. He has not yet been able to join in any normal or casual way the white man's affluent society, so he has his own. The white man's attitudes still exclude the black man and the black woman.
There's a fallacy in this country that says that any man by his merits can make it. That is not true. Do not believe that. It is not true. Because any man in this society cannot make it. That's where the whole fallacy is. The white man keeps saying to you, if you just stop being black, if you just stop shooting your people on Saturday night, if you just stop talking Negro dialect, if you clean yourself up, get yourself a job, you're going to make it in this society. It's not true. I know for myself I have a master's degree in social work, and I know that people won't accept me. And I was an honor student, and I know I can make it. They won't accept me. They don't discriminate against me because I'm a Christian. They're discriminating against me because I'm black.
The message down here is coming in stronger. It's be yourself, be black. The new generation of black young Americans is asserting itself in a new and possibly disturbing way. Many black Americans are giving up on American society. If you can't wash white, even if you have the money, if you can't wash white because you're basically black, what you do is react, sometimes radically. Here is a measure of the reaction to white is beautiful. This is a storefront school in Philadelphia. The children are being given a black preparation before they enter the city's schools. They're not especially gifted children, they're just from the neighborhood. One black man named John Churchville put it all together and financed it himself.
Right? You understand that? Yeah. All right. A number is a concept of quantity or an amount. That is wrong.
No.
A number is a concept of quantity or an amount. That is dead wrong.
He's not only teaching new math to children whose ages range from 17 months to 5 years, he's decided to give them the emotional armor they need to protect themselves against the education they're sure to receive when they start kindergarten.
Anybody tells you something wrong, are you going to do it?
No!
All right. What do you want, Janelle?
I want freedom.
When do you want it?
I want my freedom now.
No, you have to wait till next week, Janelle. You can't have it now. Can you wait till next week?
Yes.
Okay. Sit down. All right, young man, stand up. When do you want your freedom, young man?
I want freedom now.
You can wait till next week, though, can't you?
No.
Michael, you'll just have to wait till next week. You can't have it now. Are you willing to wait till next week?
No.
Suppose I said that you have to wait till next week. Now, you're going to wait till next week, aren't you?
No.
How are you going to get your freedom?
I will use any means necessary to get my freedom.
Any means necessary?
Yes.
All right, sit down. Young man, what is your name?
My name is Eric Houston.
Levante. What is your nationality?
My nationality is Afro-American.
What is freedom?
Freedom is black power.
What is black power?
Black power is...
Do you know what black power is?
No.
Well, then you should never make any statements if you don't know what they mean.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
All right. How old are you, young man?
I am 4 years old.
You're not 4, Eric. Now you tell me your right age. How old are you? How old are you?
I am 4 years old.
Are you sure you're 4?
Yes.
You're going to let me turn you around and tell you you're some other age? You're 6 years old, Eric.
No.
I can't hear you, Eric.
No.
Are you being frightened by me?
No.
I'm the teacher. I said you're 6.
I am 4 years old.
All right, then. You stand up for it, then. You shouldn't be weak. You stand up and say it. You ought to scream it in my face if I try to tell you different, right?
Yes.
Have a seat. Stand up, young man. Are you a Negro, Travis?
No.
Are you a flunky, Travis?
No.
What are you?
I am black and beautiful.
And what else are you? Are you a boy?
No.
What are you?
I'm a man.
What kind of man?
Black and beautiful man.
Or what kind? Are you an old man or a young man?
Young man.
Very good. Very good. Are you going to let somebody just make you a boy?
No.
All right. Suppose I tell you something wrong, Travis. Are you going to do it?
Yes.
You're going to do something if I tell you when it's wrong?
No.
Have a seat, young man. Eric, you're going to be reasonable, aren't you?
No.
Come here. Here you are, fine young man, right?
Yes.
Are you going to be scared of me?
No.
Are you going to be scared of some president of the United States?
No.
Some mayor?
No.
Some policeman?
No.
All right. You're a Negro. Yes! You're a Negro, Eric.
No.
Somebody pass me my stick. I said you're a Negro, boy.
No.
You're getting mighty soft. You're a Negro.
No.
Very good. All right, sit down. You, young man, you come here. Your nationality is American Negro. Yes.
No.
Your now look, don't play with me. You're a Negro.
No.
I am your teacher. You are a Negro.
No.
Suppose I threatened to beat you, what would you say? Aren't you a Negro now?
No.
What are you?
I'm black and beautiful.
What is your nationality?
My nationality is Afro-American.
Suppose I had some money in my pocket. Suppose I gave you $1 to say that you're an American Negro. This is money now. Money talks. Money talks. This dollar. And if you don't say it, you don't get it. You're an American Negro, aren't you?
No.
You won't have any money. You know you need money, don't you?
Yeah.
You need money to live, don't you?
Yes.
All right. All you have to say, Leon, is that you're an American Negro. Aren't you an American Negro? Are you an American Negro?
No.
What are you?
I'm black and beautiful.
What's your nationality?
My nationality is Afro-American.
Very good, man. Keep it up. Go sit down. You had to think about that a minute, didn't you?
Yeah.
All right. All right, everybody. What is your nationality?
My nationality is Afro-American.
Good. All right. What I did is what people are going to do to you in different ways when you get out of the school. They're not going to just come right up to you and give you $1 or say, if you say that you're an if you say you're an American Negro, I'll give you $1. But they're going to be very nice to you, some of them, and they're going to try to, get you not to love black people. They're going to try to get you to, be something other than you are. They're going to try to make it seem as though you're different from the masses of black people. And they want you to go away. Now, I'll tell you, I'll give you special things if you just come along with me and do what I say. But you must reject that. Now, you know what that means? That means you're not going to have the money you'd like to have. And money is not important. We need money. We have to buy things with it. But money is not the thing that we're living for. The only thing that makes a person worth living is being a man and being a woman. Being strong in character, being straight, telling the truth, and living in the truth and doing the right thing. You understand that? So no matter what happens, I want you all to always tell the what? You may not get the marks you're supposed to get in school. You may be doing the work, but because the teacher doesn't like your attitude, and she'll always tell you, I don't like your attitude. Because you're independent, but you're not going to school for grades. You're going for what? All right, and what kind of people is everybody in this room going to be? Tell me the kind of people you're going to be.
Black and blue.
What else? You're already that. What are you going to be? You're going to be stupid?
No.
What kind of people are you going to be?
Excellent.
You're going to be excellent, and what else? Yes, ma'am.
Strong.
And strong, and what else?
And good.
And good, and what else?
And genius.
And a genius, and what else? I'm looking for another word. All of you are geniuses right now, and you'll be better than that. What else? I'm looking for a word that begins with a B. Brilliant. Brilliant. And brilliant really means to shine. And all of you will shine. All of you are really going to be brilliant. Good enough. All right. How does everybody feel now? You ready to get ready for lunch?
Yeah!
Who's hungry?
Well, it's kind of like brainwashing. Or is it? I mean, can you blame us for overcompensating? I mean, when you take the way black history got lost, stolen, or strayed, when you think about the kids drawing themselves without faces, and when you remember the fine actors who had to play baboons to make a buck, I guess you got to give us a sin of pride. Pride. Hubris in the original Greek. It's 300 years we've been in this American melting pot, and we haven't been able to melt in yet. And that's a long wait. Listen, we've been trying all kinds of parts to make the American scene. We've been trying to play it straight and white, but it's been just bit parts. Now, from now on, we're going to play it black and American, because we're proud of both. Hubris. I'm Bill Cosby, and you take care of yourself.
All right. What is a set?
A set is a collection of objects.
What is a subset?
A subset is part of a set.
What is a member?
A member is one unit of a set.
What, in terms of set comparison, does larger mean? Everybody together. I'm going to ask you all a question. Let's see if you can do it. All right? What is arithmetic?
Arithmetic is science of numbers.
What is a number?
A member is one unit of a set.
What is, in terms of set comparison, what does larger mean?
Larger means a set that has more members in it.
In terms of set comparison, what does smaller mean?
Smaller means a set that has less members in it.
All right, now quickly, look up on the board, relax, but think very quickly, you understand?
Yes.
All right, in terms of set comparison, we want to compare two sets, and I want you to tell me which is larger. The first time around.
A number is a concept of quantity.
The United States Army in Vietnam. During the last 200 years, the American military has fought 8 major. The source of its strength remains the same: men, young men.
I'm getting a little dizzy, so if I don't make it, just wish me luck, okay? I'm gonna go along with this room and your room in case something happens. I can get
Okay.
One man, Thor, help him across, will you, man?
Somebody give me a hand.
Stick with the gun.
American fighting men 10,000 miles away from New Haven and Watts, fighting another war. White men, black men. Today they fight as equals, and long before the violent birth of our nation, black men died in American wars. They died as equals, but they were not always allowed to fight or live. as equals. And in most history books, the story of the black men in battle is usually ignored. Now, true history has many surprises. This monument on the Boston Common honors the first martyrs in America's struggle for freedom. Since the founding of American colonies, tensions between the colonists and the British troops had been building. On March 5th, 1770, these tensions exploded into violence. British troops opened fire on an angry Boston crowd. A drawing by Paul Revere records this pivotal instant in American history, the Boston Massacre. The first to fall was Crispus Attucks, an escaped slave, a black man. This was the beginning. Revolution became inevitable. The colonial army needed men, but General George Washington did not want black men. Despite Washington's official policy, Negroes willingly fought against the British. The British officer who ordered the shot heard round the world at Lexington, Major Pitcairn, was killed at the Battle of Bunker Hill by a colonial sharpshooter. His name? Peter Salem. He was a black man. While General Washington discouraged Negro enlistments, the British promised freedom to any slave who would join the Loyalist cause. This was the first of many attempts to undermine Negro support in American wars. Although the British had only limited success, General Washington was alarmed, and he called for an active recruitment of black freemen. When Washington crossed the Delaware on Christmas Day, 1776, two Negroes were with him, Oliver Cromwell and Prince Whipple. Nearly 5,000 black men fought in the American Revolution. In 1813, a young America was at war again. Captain Oliver Hazard Perry didn't want Negro sailors, but the Battle of Lake Erie changed his mind. He later said, "They seemed absolutely insensible to danger. An act of Congress had restricted the Navy to able-bodied white males, but black sailors fought and died aboard American warships." In 1814, General Andrew Jackson actively recruited black soldiers for the defense of New Orleans. Until then, fear of slave revolts in the South had restricted black participation in the war. More than 600 free Negroes helped hold strategic positions against the British assault. Jackson's appeal had been to black men who were free. Most Negroes were still slaves. By 1860, growing pains had begun to split the nation. Slavery was a public symbol for the deep problems that led to the Civil War. At first, it was a white man's war. 11 days after Confederate troops opened fire on Fort Sumter, a free Negro volunteered to fight for the Union and was refused. The official policy in the North said that Negro slaves were contraband, captured property, not potential fighting men. President Lincoln feared the loss of border state support if he used black troops in the war. And meanwhile, from all over the North came offers of black regiments. From the South came escaped slaves who were willing to join the fight for freedom. Bearing the scars of slavery, a few were allowed to serve. They became symbols of new hope for black men, both and free. After months of costly and indecisive fighting, the North began to recruit Negro troops. There was an all-out war, and military necessity overruled racial politics. By June 1862, the first Negro combat unit, called the Corps d'Afrique, the African Corps, was organized. Black sailors were mixed with white seamen aboard fighting ships on both sides. The Union's Mississippi Squadron reported more than 800 black sailors. Negro sailors were aboard the ironclad Monitor when it fought the Merrimack. One Black River pilot, Robert Smalls, became a Union hero when he delivered his Confederate gunboat and its slave crew to the Union fleet. On January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. The United States Armed Forces were officially open to all Negroes. Freedom, however, did not bring equality. The Civil War ended slavery, but marked the beginning of a segregated American military. Segregated Negro units were called United States Colored Troops. Former slaves clashed with slave owners. At Milliken's Bend, Louisiana, 1,000 black soldiers fought 2,000 white Texans in fierce hand-to-hand combat, but were finally overrun. Most black troops were non-combatants. They were laborers, cooks, and teamsters. There were also spies, couriers, and scouts. By the end of the war, 186,000 Negroes had joined the Union Army. Even the South had passed the Negro Enlistment Bill in 1864, but it was too late. More than 500,000 Americans died in the Civil War. 38,000 of them were black. After the war, 4 all-Negro regiments were organized and sent to frontier forts on the Western Plains. Their officers, of course, were all white. Saturday afternoon at the local movie house, most Americans learned that the taming of the Wild West was a matter of the white man versus the redskin. Few history books record the fact that when the cavalry rode to the rescue, troopers were often black. Black troopers died with General Custer at the Little Bighorn. They helped run Sitting Bull into Canada, chased desperados like Billy the Kid, and captured the Apache chief Geronimo. These are some of the real troopers who fought the Indians on the Western Plain. 14 of them won the Congressional Medal of Honor. Havana Harbor, February 15, 1898. 30 Negroes were aboard the battleship Maine that night. 20 lost their lives. When the Spanish-American War broke out, black troops were called from the frontier and shipped to Cuba. Within months, the all-Negro 10th Cavalry had saved Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders at Las Guasimas. Black soldiers played their most important role to date in the Spanish-American War. Black troopers fought at El Caney and joined the Rough Riders in the charge up San Juan Hill. "I want no better men beside me in battle than these colored troopers," said Colonel Roosevelt. But 7 years later, as president, Roosevelt court-martialed 3 companies of the all-Negro 25th Infantry when there was violence in Brownsville, Texas, due to discrimination against black troops. Tough and independent black soldiers refused to conform to servile white stereotypes. White hostility in Houston, Texas, 11 years later, provoked an even bloodier clash. Black soldiers of the 24th Regiment shot up the town, killing 17 whites. The result was a mass murder trial. 13 Negro soldiers were hanged and 41 sentenced to life imprisonment. When the United States entered World War I, Americans said they would make the world safe for democracy. The country mobilized, but Negro enlistments were restricted. Once again, however, manpower needs overruled racial prejudice. The Army's highest-ranking Negro officer, Colonel Charles Young, was retired as physically unfit for duty, even though he rode horseback from Ohio to Washington, D.C. to prove his fitness. the American military remained segregated and most black troops were commanded by whites. General John J. Pershing, commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, earned his nickname Blackjack as a commander of Negro troops before World War I. Pershing had no objections to black combat troops, but many high-ranking officers and government officials publicly questioned the black man's ability to fight. During the war, more than 370,000 Negroes were in uniform, 40,000 on the front lines. Most black soldiers were relegated to service units. They were laborers, ditch diggers, and stevedores. Now, the 1st Negro Combat Division overseas, the 93rd, went into battle April 1918, fighting under French command. Homegrown discrimination followed black soldiers into the trenches. One document widely circulated in France openly declared that Negroes were inferior to whites. Despite this discrimination, black combat units fought well. The 369th Regiment saw 191 straight days of frontline action and never lost a foot of ground. Black troops won many combat awards, and they were the first to win the highest French military honor, the Croix de Guerre. For most Americans, however, the black combat record was obscured by controversy. One black regiment under American command was accused of sneaking to the rear. A government investigation found no basis for widespread criticism of Negro troops, but within 4 months after the armistice, all black troops were shipped home. Negro troops had been well received by the French, but exaggerated reports of black soldiers raping French women prompted American officials to get black troops out of Europe. In New York, Negro veterans were marched up Fifth Avenue through cheering crowds. Back home to Harlem. During the years between the two wars, Negro troops were reduced to less than 3% of the armed forces. After World War II broke out in Europe, America began a new mobilization. The 1940 Selective Service Act said there would be no racial discrimination in the selection and training of America's armed forces, but the military maintained its tradition of segregation. Public figures like Joe Louis became symbols for the recruitment of a black American army. Military thinking still relegated most Negroes to labor battalions, but some were trained for combat duties, even elite units. Elite, but separate. The pattern was clear. There were going to be 2 armies, 2 navies, and 2 air forces. One white, the other black. The military reflected a racially divided America. The armed forces felt that their job was to fight, not to lead social reform. Black America's Air Force began training on the Alabama campus of Tuskegee Institute. The 99th Pursuit Squadron was activated in 1941 under the first Negro West Point graduate since 1889, Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. One of the first American heroes of World War II was Dory Miller, a Navy mess steward at Pearl Harbor. Dory shot down 4 attacking Japanese planes and won the Navy Cross. 3 years later, Dory Miller was killed in action. He was still a mess steward. Most Negroes in the Navy were messmen, and change came slowly. The Black American Navy in February 1944 included 2 anti-submarine vessels with all Negro crews. Their officers, with one exception, were white. The absurdity of a Navy within a Navy finally led Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal to order the integration of all naval vessels. Most of the fighting in the Pacific fell to the Marine Corps, and for 167 years the Marine Corps was all white. And in 1942, the Corps began enlisting black fighting men for the first time. As manpower needs went up, resistance to black troops went down. Segregation, however, remained. Military leaders argued that segregation reduced racial friction. In fact, it intensified it. During the war, there were racial incidents at home and overseas, from the defense plants of Detroit to base camps in Guam. In the Pacific, Negroes worked and fought at Guadalcanal, Okinawa, and Iwo Jima. Death and suffering made no racial distinctions. The 99th Pursuit Squadron represented a major departure from the military policy of using Negroes mostly as service troops. It was a token gesture. After years of pressure, black men were finally allowed to prove that they could perform the complex jobs of a modern military machine. The 99th established one of the best combat records of the war. Other all-Negro Air Corps units followed, and in all, 95 black pilots won the Distinguished Flying Cross. Two all-Negro infantry divisions served overseas, the 93rd in the Pacific and the 92nd in Italy. Public officials, military men, and war correspondents closely watched the 92nd's performance. On February 14, 1945, elements of the division were accused of melting away in the face of German resistance. Lack of faith between black troops and their white officers and a confused chain of command weakened the 92nd. Morale was often low. 90% of the unit scored poorly on military intelligence tests, and many had not been trained with their basic weapon, the M1 rifle. 542 Bronze Stars and many other combat awards were earned by the men of the 92nd. But controversy marred their record. One Negro officer wrote after the war, "When I think of what the 92nd might have been, I'm heartsick." The controversial record of the 92nd was widely publicized, although it was only one of the 4,000 black units that served during World War II. The German counteroffensive, the Battle of the Bulge, broke through Allied lines, advancing toward the Rhine. It also resulted in a breakthrough in American Army racial policies. 2,500 black volunteers were integrated into white companies on the front. Germans forced the first large-scale racial integration of the American Army. And after the battle was won, most of the Negro volunteers were returned to their segregated units. More than 1 million Negroes served in the American Armed Forces during World War II, half of them overseas. Black soldiers landed at Omaha Beach on D-Day. Negro anti-aircraft units fought on Normandy Beach, in Italy, and in North Africa. Black engineers worked on the Lido Road in Burma, the Stillwell Road in China, and linked Alaska and Canada with the Alcan Highway. At Anzio, black engineers unloaded nearly 2,000 tons of supplies under fire. More than half of the drivers in the famous Red Ball Express were Negroes. Black troops served all across Europe and throughout the Pacific. Many were decorated for bravery in combat. With the end of the war, America began to reassess the racial policies of the military. The enormous manpower needs of the war effort had already threatened racial segregation in the armed forces. Brigadier General Benjamin O. Davis Sr., the military's highest-ranking black officer, began his career as a private in the Spanish-American War. His was a lonely career. A new era in the history of the Negro and the armed forces was about to begin. The black community had grown far more militant in its demands for racial equality. Black veterans came home and joined a new fight, the fight for civil rights. In October 1947, a National Commission on Civil Rights formed by Harry Truman called for a new government program dedicated to the elimination of racial segregation from American life. On July 26, 1948, President Truman signed a historic executive order. He declared, "There shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed forces without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin." The job of changing a century-old military tradition of racial segregation began. At first there was resistance, but Secretary of Defense James Forrestal and Secretary of the Air Force Stuart Symington strongly supported the new program. "We're going to end segregation," Symington told the generals. "You've got to stop this double talk and act." War in Korea hastened the breakdown of America's segregated armed forces. By 1953, only 5% of Negro enlisted men remained in all-black units. The percentage of Negro officers in the Army had doubled. One military report announced, "Efficiency has been increased, disciplinary problems reduced, and morale improved." Historic all-Negro units were integrated with white troops. A year before it was integrated, the 24th Infantry Regiment added a final victory to 81-year history. Black soldiers of the 24th captured the city of Yukchon, our first major victory of the Korean War. For the most part, the history of the Korean War was not a history of white troops or black troops. In the military, an order is an order, and the American armed forces had been ordered to integrate. By the end of the war, the military found itself in the forefront of the civil rights movement. On May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court handed down its historic school desegregation decision. The armed forces had ordered its civilian schools desegregated 4 months before. American soldiers returning from Korea had not only fought a war, they had lived an experiment. The success of racial integration in the military was an undeniable fact. For many Americans, both white and black, the impersonal discipline of an integrated armed forces was their first experience of racial equality. A little more than a decade later, America was at war again. The carrier Kitty Hawk launches airstrikes against the North Vietnam. In the war in Vietnam, black and white fighting men are fully integrated. 11% of the American population is black. In Vietnam, Negroes are about 20% of the frontline forces. Even more are in elite units. 14% of the Americans killed in Vietnam are Negroes. Young black fighting men along the DMZ and in the jungles around Saigon say, "We're proving ourselves." But there's already 200 years of proof. The irony is that many of these young blacks and many white Americans think that this war in Vietnam is the first time black men have fought in an American war. The purpose of this has been to set the record straight.
And now, here is Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu with his penetrating presentation of countering the conspiracy to destroy black boys.
There's no topic that concerns me more than the one on the conspiracy to destroy black boys. And the reason is when our little boys are in preschool and primary grades, they're very innocent and very enthusiastic about learning. But something happens to that, and we need to find out what that is. My younger son is on the cover of this particular book, and I would like for him to grow up to be a man. Like many of you have already told me, that you have sons and male students as well. Now, there's two parts of the conspiracy, Volume 1, and this is Volume 2. In Volume 1, we raised 4 questions. First question is, when did the conspiracy start? Who is against black boys? Why is there a conspiracy against them? And what exactly is the conspiracy? That's in Volume 1. In Volume 2, we look at the relationships between mothers and their sons. That must be studied. We also must look at female teachers and black male students. That must also be studied. We must look at some case studies. In other words, many of us are doing a very good job developing black boys to be men. What is it that some of us are doing that others are not doing? And then last but not least, a program called the Rites of Passage into Manhood. See, it used to be we knew when black boys became men. But now many of us don't know when we're men. It's how much reefer we smoke, how much wine we drink, how many babies we make. Until black men spell it out to black boys what it means to be a man, this conspiracy will continue. But let's go back to Volume 1. When did it start? And as we begin to look at that, I want to also share with you why we call it a conspiracy to destroy black boys. You see, contrary to belief at birth, there are more black boys born in the world than there are girls. It's close, but it's 1.03 black boys born in the world to 1.0 black girls. Hear me clearly. At birth, black boys outnumber black girls 1.03 to 1.0. A brief 18 years later, it is now 1.0 available, and that's the key word, available black men, to 1.8 available black women. Almost 2 adult women for every 1 adult man. Now, the only question that should be going through your minds right now is what happened. We keep raising the wrong question. We keep asking, why do black men hang on corners? Why do black men lack direction? Well, if you ask this question, you're asking the question 18 to 30 years too late. It is not a conspiracy to destroy black men. It's a conspiracy to destroy black boys. If you destroy him as a boy, he'll never become a man. Now I can look around the room and tell you know where are they. If they are not available to black women, where are they? Call the roll. In jail, there are 329,000 brothers in prison right now. 1 of every 4 brothers will go to prison. Where else? Or death. There's numerous ways that we die. There's homicide, suicide, drugs, war, high blood pressure, and the leading killer among black men, lung cancer. Our love for cigarettes, especially cool. Smoke them all day long, die the exact same way. Cool. Where else? We have prison, death. What else to make us unavailable to black women? Yes, homosexuality. As you said earlier, 1 of every 9 men in this country are homosexual. Where else? Yes.
Hospitalized, institutionalized.
Okay, so institutionalization, and there's not only in terms of hospitals, but also mental institutions, and of course, when they get released, many times being homeless. There's still one other large popular area. Thimby?
They marry white women.
Okay, interracial marriages. Now I want to pause there for a moment, because you would think if anybody is going to marry outside the race, it would be black women. You got 2 black women for every 1 black man. But as Thimby pointed out, it's exactly the opposite. There are 164,000 interracial marriages, of which 116,000 are brothers. That means 48,000 sisters. It's almost a 2-to-1 ratio of black men to black women marrying outside the race. But remember, as you said in the earlier workshop, if the definition of beauty is light skin, long hair, and blue eyes, why stop with Renee, the light-skinned sister? Why not get you the real thing? There's some serious problems here. And then black men tell me, I can't find a black woman to understand me. You mean out of 20 million black women, you can't find one to understand you? You don't need a white woman, you need a psychiatrist. But that's another workshop on relationships. But I just want to share with you, we got some very serious problems. But to tease this audience, black women are tired of being by themselves. And in the earlier issue of Essence magazine, the article said, guess who's coming to dinner now? Black women are tired of being by themselves. In other words, brothers, you can't have it both ways. You can't have 2 black women to choose from and still marry a white woman. You can't have it both ways. Black women are tired of being by themselves. Now, that's with regards to the stats, why we wrote the book, because we saw the shortage of black men. But what we want to begin to find out is, when did it start? You see, it's called the fourth grade syndrome. Studies show that black boys may be the best students in the country up until the fourth grade. So we wanted to find out what your son, a male student, was doing at the beginning of the third grade, then at the end of the seventh grade, and then measure the progress. Let me give you 3 examples. We had a little boy 5 years ago on an Alpha reading test score at the 98th percentile in the country. In other words, a walking genius. That means only 2% male, female, white, or black had a higher score than he at the beginning of the third grade. At the end of 7th grade, the same boy now drops down to the 35th percentile. Engineer potential here, pimp or pusher now, scores should have improved 5 years, instead they only improved 1.3. 2 more examples. We had a little boy at the 92nd percentile. He dropped down to the 24th percentile, and his scores only improved 2.1. But let me give you the average example. We had a little boy at the 63rd percentile. He dropped down to the 4th percentile, and his scores didn't improve a year, a month, a week, not even a day. There are 3 critical stages in black boys' development: infancy to 9, 9 to 13, and 13 to 18. You see, it's easy to see the negative behavior here when he's already dropped out, laid up on some street corner lacking direction. It's more difficult to see it around 9 years of age, when they begin to sit further in the back of the class, when they begin to ask less questions, when their ball becomes more important than their book, when they begin to cheat on their tests. We appeal to you to turn your sons and male students on early. Teach them how to read early. Teach them the beauty of being black and believing in God early. But many of us have waited, and we have waited almost too late to develop black boys to be men. You know what I'm getting at. America spends $2,300 on Head Start. They spend $38,000 on prison. If Reagan wanted to balance the budget, I can show you save about $36,000 per person. It's much easier to educate than it is to incarcerate. Now you raise the questions. How long do you stay in Head Start? Year? 2 years is the most? How long do you stay in prison? The rest of your life? Question number 1. Question number 2, does Head Start work? A 19-year study documents that Head Start works, but in prison, 85% of the inmates that get released go right back in. But as Jesse Jackson says, we have 2 choices. We can either send me to Penn State or to State Penn. It's your choice. We have got to find ways to intervene. Now, we have a whole workshop just on the 4th grade syndrome. I now want to ask you, what are some of the reasons you feel to explain why black students, especially black boys, were doing so well K through 3, and now scores declining in the intermediate and upper grades? What explains it? Yes?
I think the learning style changes abruptly in 4th grade from what might have been more right brain activities in the primary grades into all of a sudden all left brain activities.
Okay, so a change in learning styles or methodology from the teacher, from a holistic learning style to a left brain. Okay, very good. Any others? Yes?
I think that there's a lot of rejection on the part of the female teachers in the classroom.
And the rejection increases with the upper grades? Why do you think it increases?
Because of the students, perhaps it's his natural makeup, hyperactivity and that sort of thing.
And that may be increasing? Well, it may be increasing because we're now expecting them to stay in school or stay in a chair even longer. Okay. Any others that contribute to this 4th grade syndrome? We have a change in learning style. We have the teacher's outlook on the student. What else? Yes?
The student becomes more culturally aware and differs significantly from the teacher often.
Okay, so the child's now becoming more aware of their culture and racial identity. Okay, very good. Any others? The major reason you have not given yet, and maybe that's why this problem is still with us, Terry? First name is?
Richard.
I'm sorry, Richard.
Well, the peer group starts to form and become stronger about the peer group.
And that's unfortunate, Richard, that you said that, because as the age increases, peer pressure is on the increase, while parental involvement is on a decrease. I don't know who told parents when your child gets older, they need less of your time rather than more. When I speak to Head Start parents, 80% of them are there. Elementary school, 30%. High school, almost a joke. We have to work on that. That's another workshop, too, on parenting all the way through, not just in those quote-unquote tender years. But the major reason, it's not on the board yet. Still looking for it. Yes, go in.
I think, too, that young boys, and particularly young black boys, in the primary grades, they have many mother figures, and they have very few men figures, and particularly black male figures. And I think it makes a big difference come grade 4.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it's the major reason. And let me now give my first position. I sincerely believe that only men can make boys men. Now, don't misquote me. I didn't say that a single female parent or female teacher cannot rear or educate her child. But she need not do that by herself. What she calls upon her father, her brother, an uncle, a male neighbor, a nephew, a coworker. There needs to be some men in our children's lives. I want you to explain to me how a boy is going to grow up to be a man if he's never seen any. In order to be anything, you must see it first. Remember in the earlier workshop, and I'll go through this very quickly, from the University of Michigan, we wanted to find out what was the major influence on children. We said 1950, it was home, school, church, peer group, and television. And then we gave you 1980. Home was still number 1, peer group in the number 2 position, television 3, school dropped down to number 4, church last on the list. Let's go back to my statement. My statement said that only men can make boys men. Now let's see where black boys are going to find men. Let's first of all look at his home. 62% of all black children live in a single-run household. It's a very good chance he would not find a man here. I'm going to hold off on the streets and drop down to television. Can you name me 5 positive adult black men on television outside the news? And you can't name Cosby because the show just started. Name me 5.
Outside the news?
No. Outside the news. And you better not say George Jefferson. So they find very few black male role models on television. Now let's drop down to the schools. 83% of all elementary school teachers are women. 95% of all teacher aides are women. And when do men teach? After the critical 4th grade, or they're in the upper grade, or they're the PE teacher, the janitor, or the principal. Very few before the 4th grade where black boys need them the most. And lastly, the church. Most young people, men don't go to church. And the reason is we lie to them. First of all, we made Jesus Christ white. The man surely was not white. And we have a book called What Color Was Jesus to explain that. He had hair the texture of wool and feet the color of bronze. But secondly, the Lord's Prayer says on earth as it is in heaven. Young people and men want some action. They want some programs. If there are no programs in your church, they will see you later in heaven. As a result of not finding a man at home, few on television, few in school, and not wishing to attend church, the last place is the streets. And that's the problem. The streets do a very poor job making men. They do a better job making pimps, pushers, and a few basketball players. Their hero, Michael Jordan, has said there were 1 million brothers that won his job last year in the NBA. Of this million, only 400,000 will even make it to play high school ball. Of this 400,000, only 4,000 will make it to play college ball. Of this 4,000, only 35 will go to the coveted NBA. Of this 35, only 7 start. And the average life in the NBA is 4 years. You got 1 million brothers looking for 7 full-time jobs that last 4 years. This conspiracy is complex. It goes beyond the NBA. Even schools are in on it. What will be the first thing you see when you walk into a Cincinnati high school? A large trophy case. In other words, even schools give more glory to their ball players than the scholars. That's said in the earlier workshop. Where are the pep rallies for the honor roll? In other words, even school, I can understand the NBA, but even schools give more glory to their ball players than their scholars. This conspiracy goes beyond the NBA, though. It goes beyond schools. Jesse Jackson is giving you the clue one more time. Is it not possible for a black man to be president? For a white woman to be president? For a black woman to be president? Is the club only reserved for European men? You didn't know that a white boy with a high school diploma makes more money than a white woman, or black man with a college degree? The motive for the conspiracy is clear. For the question of why is there a conspiracy, the answer is white male supremacy. In other words, white men are not afraid of women, black or white, because women have no power anywhere in this world. The threat to European men will come not from women, it will come from other men. And the best way to destroy black men is to destroy them as a boy. The motive is white male supremacy. But before you get comfortable blaming somebody else, let me make sure we're clear. On a conspiracy, there would always be 2. You see, you have the active conspirators, and you have the passive conspirator. See, it's like child abuse. There were always 2. You have the father who does the beating, active. But you have the mother who turns her back, passive. Isn't apathy, indifference, low expectations, buying hot goods in the black community, isn't that also part of a conspiracy? You have the active and you have the passive. In a conspiracy, there would always be 2. Let me now give you the starting lineup. We'll start with the active ones first and then move to the passive. Leading off, batting in the number 1 position, representing this country, institutional racism. Batting first is the president. He bats in the number 1 position. Batting second, representing the Trilateral Commission, the Fortune 500, big business. David Rockefeller bats number 2. Batting third, representing the military complex. You didn't know, black people, 12% of the population, 1/3 of the military. and died 41% of the time in the Vietnam War, the chief of staff. That's number 3. Batting 4th, and I don't mean Marlon Brando. I mean the real Godfather. Drugs running rampant in the black community. Please don't deceive yourself. If America is the #1 power in the world, they could police their borders to stop the drug traffic. These men and what they represent intentionally want to make sure the black boys never grow up to be men. But remember, they got some help from some of us who really like black boys, who may even have black boys at home, just didn't know any better. And so we bat number 5 through 9. Batting 5th, not all, but some mothers who raise their daughters and love their sons. Batting 6th, some female teachers who don't understand that boys have different learning style than girls. Batting 7th, representing the media in this country, shows like Gary Coleman and Webster. Shows that make me sick. Shows that illustrate that black men cannot raise intelligent black boys to be men. In other words, we need a white father for Gary Coleman and for Webster. It's all part of the media image. It goes all the way back to Tarzan, all the way back to Superman, all the way back to Rambo, to Rocky. All part of white male fantasy trying to control the world. It's all part of a scheme. Make sure you heard me. It's consistent with Superman, Tarzan, Santa Claus, the white father, all part of that scheme. Batting 8, the macho image, Mr. T, and we'll look at today someone like Prince or Magic Johnson or Isaiah Thomas. In other words, no need to study, just be macho, just be a superstar. In other words, Mr. T, Prince for entertainment, Isaiah Thomas or Magic for sports. And then last but not least, a black woman by the name of Kathy, who will do anything for a man, and a black man by the name of Willie, who does not feel good about himself. You see your faces right now. Who's Kathy? You have to stay to the end to find out who's who. The starting lineup, Reagan, no, you don't know who Willie is, though. We got a new theory for you now. We used to end with Donna and Kathy, but now we're going to give you the Eddie Willie theory. We have a new one. So we have we have Ronald Reagan, David Rockefeller, Caspar Weinberger, the Godfather, some mothers. I didn't say all, some. Some mothers, some female teachers, the media image, macho in sports, and Kathy and Willie. These people and what they represent, intentionally or subconsciously, want to make sure that black boys never grew up to be men. Let's now look at the active ones first. I want to make sure we start in the right place. The conspiracy did not start with black mothers. It started somewhere else. We must start where it began. It began with active conspirators. I want to now look at them first. In looking at the active conspirators, I want to make sure we understand that these kind of terms don't make sense. We are not the minority. In other words, there are 4.5 billion people living in the world. Of this number, 80% of the world's population has color. That means only 20% of the world's population lacks color. Now you tell me who's the minority. You see, it's called the African Triangle. It goes all the way back. We're not the minority. We're only a minority. We allow ourselves to be divided up from our brothers and sisters in Nigeria, in Jamaica, in the United States. Look at this African Triangle. After all these years, other than the way we're dressed, you can't tell who's who. There are 1 billion people living in China alone, and we are second. 500 living in Africa, 160 living in Central and South America, 40 million living here in the United States. We are not the minority. Now, the question is, how can so small control so much? That's why I respect them so much. Think about it. You have a gang. You have one gang with 80 people, another gang with 20, and the 20 going to win? The only way they can do that is by controlling the mind. Because whoever controls the mind will also control the body. Let's look at this. Let's break this down in half. What you come out with is 10% European women and 10% European men. See, it's not even 20. It's really 10% European men. In other words, the Trilateral Commission, they want to control more than just their countries. They want to control the world. And they have pulled this off. Now, there's a tremendous amount of pressure when you're this small trying to control so much. Now, maybe you can't understand it. It's been a long time. It goes back to Egypt for us, having that much power. But can you imagine that small number trying to control the world? A tremendous amount of pressure is on that small group with that much power. In other words, the first thing that men are taught to do is not to cry. I'm quoting from their own Goldberg. The book is called The Hazards of Being a Male. The tremendous pressure when you're so small trying to control so much. The first thing that men are taught to do is not to cry. Think about it. Ever seen Ronald Reagan cry? John Wayne cry? They died with their boots on. They died in their saddles. They died like men. Now, any psychologist will tell you that crying may avoid suicide later. But as a result of European men not crying, European men commit suicide more than anybody else. Black men who want so much to be like European men are very close second. European women are third, and the most sane person in America, she don't make no money, but stay close to God and her children and cry. Black women commit suicide less than anybody else. Give yourself a hand clap. In other words, if you think that money is the source of all your happiness, they make more money than anybody else. But they obviously are not happy. In other words, money may not be the key. Putting God and your children first may be the key. Poorest people in America commit the less amount of suicide. First thing men are taught to do is not to cry. Second thing men are taught to do is to ignore pain. Got hypertension? Shake it off. Cancer? Shake that off too. Monday Night Football. Walter Payton goes off the field with a busted knee. Comes back on a half hour later and Howard Cosell says, oh, what a man. The man was crazy to go back on the field. But you see, men are taught to be macho, to ignore pain. Not women. When women's finger bleeds, to the doctor's office. Women take care of themselves, but not men. You know it's gotten so bad that studies have now documented that when men are married, they live longer. That's an insult to my intelligence. It means that I cannot live long by myself. I got to leave my mama and go to my wife. Because if I don't, I'm probably going to smoke cigarettes, drink liquor, and eat a lot of pork on the streets. But with women, annual checkup, that's what they encourage men to do. Drink a regular amount of water and eat a salad on a regular basis. What am I getting at? European women say they're so oppressed. European women live to 77 years of age. Black women live to 75 years of age. European men die at 69 years of age, and black men die at 64.8. Albert, you and I die before the first Social Security check. That law needs to be changed to lower it for us. We aren't living long to collect on the payment. This is sad. I'm gonna die 10 years before my wife. This is not theoretical. It's not just my son here. It's my life here and your life. Can I not live as long as my wife? 10 years before her? Men are first of all taught not to cry. Secondly, they're taught to ignore pain. And then last but not least, they're taught to bring home the bacon. Or as I say as a vegetarian, to bring home the fruit and the vegetables. In other words, to bring home the money. Ronald Reagan knows this. Rockefeller knows this. That the best way to destroy black men is to deny them the opportunity to work. You know what I'm getting at, because Bill Moore didn't tell you that was Vanishing Black Family documentary. 1 of every 3 marriages in this country, black or white, ends in a divorce in 18 months. Now, you see, it used to be if you got a divorce, something was wrong with you. But when you have a stat this side, something must be going on in our society. I now want to explain what that is. When America believed in agriculture, America believed in extended family. When America believed in the factory, industrialism, America believed in the nuclear family. But now that America believes in the computer, now America believes in a single-parent family. Make sure you see my analysis. When the economy changed, the family structure changed. There was more than love in these relationships. There was some money involved here. Our grandparents worked the fields together, had economic reason to stay together, and so they did. In the factory, man works in factory, woman takes care of children. Economic reason again to stay together. But in this new economy, where you now have women working just as much, if not more, than men, you now hear women telling men, I don't need you. Got my own job. Do what I want to do when I want to do it. And we are now doing it very well and by ourselves. You know the #1 song in America a couple of years ago, Ain't Nothing Going On But the Rent. If you want to be with me, you got to have a J-O-B. It's all about money. All about money. When the economy changed, the family structure changed. And so now we have a lot of people making plenty of money and lonely. They place money before family. You see, black men want to do what white men do. Buy their family a house in the suburbs, 2 cars, and once a year go down to Orlando for Disney World vacation. And when black men can't do that, they don't feel they're worthy enough to stay. Now you see, the problem is there are 2 responses black women can give to black men when they're out of work. Now the first response some women say is, well, if you ain't working, you got to go. If you ain't working, you got to go. That's the mistake. Because black men don't hire nor fire, nor control the means of production. Now, before black men say that's right, brother, you tell them, please, brothers, quit assuming that black women took our jobs away. Because black women also do not hire nor fire. We are being played off against each other for some crumbs. We recommend the second response. For black women to say to that man, well, if you ain't working, can you at least go back to school? Can you at least learn a skill? Or at least make dinner or wash dishes while I'm gone? But the problem is there are very few black men that look to black women for definition of manhood. Black men, as I said earlier, want to do what white men do, and that means be the breadwinner. What I'm getting at is we're going to have to redefine what it means to be a man. Because if being a man means being the provider, with 25% of black men out of work, that's a suicidal definition. You see, if I lose my job tomorrow, I'm still a man. As long as I'm responsible, treat my wife correctly, raise my children, that's responsibility. I'm not going to allow my employer to reduce my masculinity. I need to define what being a man is. And I think it's a perfect balance between the mental, the spiritual, and the physical. Not being a breadwinner, but a balance between the mental, physical, and the spiritual. Isn't it interesting? You have two black men. Both lose their jobs. One black man resorts to crime, leaves his home. He's been reduced by the society. The other black man sells newspapers, sells peanuts, does whatever he can to take care of his family. Same economic situation, but a different set of values. We have to work on that. A new definition can resolve this problem. I'm not belittling money. You have to have money living in America, but that's not the criteria for manhood. Boys make babies. Men take care of them. That's the definition. One more comment here. I mentioned earlier in our past workshop on the peer group. Let me share with you here this dichotomy where you have the mental over here and you have the physical over here. You see, a real problem is our boys have a difficult time finding a balance in the middle. I mentioned earlier homosexuality, and the figure is 1 of every 9 men in this country are homosexuals. It's going to increase. And the reason is because we've been so skilled to the physical, being macho, that when our boys want to be on the honor roll, they're labeled sissies. Want to be involved in the fine arts, labeled sissies. Want to be open, honest, communicative, labeled sissies. When you label something long enough, you begin to act that way. So you have the homosexuals over here, and you have the athletes, the machos, over here. Tremendous dichotomy between these two. We have got to find some men that can teach black boys and Hispanic boys the balance between the physical and the mental. There's simply too much pressure over here. It's hard to find the balance, and women can't teach this. Only a man can do this. We need more black men who can do both of these areas. Physically balanced and mentally balanced. And spiritual in the middle. Comments, questions about what is a man? We've been looking at male behavior. Any comments or questions? Yes, Gwen?
Explain what you meant by saying women raise their daughters.
We're coming to that, Gwen. Matter of fact, I think it's probably the next point. Matter of fact, it is. Praise the Lord. Let's go to the next point. See, we were looking at the active conspirators, and we were looking at what the effect that causes on us in terms of male behavior. And we may not be able to control or to change Reagan, Rockefeller, Weinberger, but your question we can change. We can look at some mothers. And I said some, not all. The rumor is that some mothers raise their daughters and love their sons. My boy always loved his mama. 40 years of age, still went home with you. That needs to stop. Your boy is not yours. He is a future husband, a future father, and needs to be raised that way. Now, what do I mean by raised? Teach your son how to cook, to make up his own bed, to clean up his own bathtub ring because you raised your daughter. On the honor roll, every marking period. Goes to church with you every Sunday, and she can cook, sew, iron, and clean. All but then we have your son. Ain't never seen an honor roll. He plays basketball all evening long. Never goes to church and can't boil a hot dog. The rumor is we have some, not all, raising their daughters and loving their sons. Now, I know the historical reason. The historical reason is our societies always try to destroy black men. The lynchings. So black mothers always want to overprotect their sons. What's the reason today? I know the KKK is on the rise, but what's the reason today? Is it because your own black man didn't stay? You now replaced your man with your son? Your son is not yours. He's a future husband, a future father, and needs to be raised that way. Quit telling these 9-year-old boys they the man of the house. Ain't no 9-year-old boy ready to be no man of the house. But because you told him that, he now begins to wonder. When you then bring over your man for the evening, Mom, I thought I was the man of the house. Why are you bringing him over? You can't have it both ways. If he's going to be the man of the house, quit bringing your boyfriend over on Saturday nights. You know what's sad, though? These brothers think what they can do with their mamas, they can do with their teacher, their coach, and everybody else. In other words, living at home with you in a $100 pair of gym shoes, $80 pair of a Gucci handbag. In other words, these boys have mastered how to manipulate their mamas. And they think what they can do with you, they can do with everybody else. Only to find out what you let them get away with, no one else does. In other words, 90% of all teenage pregnancy programs counsel the women. We have teenage pregnancy running rampant. But as far as the last time I looked, it took 2 to make a baby. But 90% of the programs let the brothers off the hook. The real question is, who is going to teach black boys to be responsible? And you don't start when he makes a baby. In other words, the real question is, who's going to teach black boys to be responsible for his personal hygiene, for his clothes, for his chores, for his room, for his siblings, for his allowance, for his studies, for his toys, for his schedule, and then his sex life. You don't start responsibility at 16. It starts very early. For example, when I was growing up, my father opened up a mutual fund account for me. And every year on my birthday, he explained to me, this is how much money you have in your account. But if you make a baby, all your money is going to take care of your child. Should it be any different? If I enjoy making it, shouldn't I also take care of it? So my oldest son, who was 15, I've been doing the same thing with him, the 9-year-old and the 15-year-old. So he told me last year, he said, Daddy, this money looks so good to me, I've just decided I'm not ever making me a baby. I'm keeping all my money to myself. But the point is, the boy understands responsibility. He understands if I make a baby, you will take care of it. There are mothers who know their son impregnated some girl on the same block, and they say, well, you know, boys will be boys. Yeah. They will be whatever you let them be. I want to pause now. Explain this. Why are some mothers raising their daughters and loving their sons? Did you grow up in a household where you did more work if you're the sister than your brothers did? Why is that? And you know what else I believe? I believe that child rearing has a lot to determine in marriage. In other words, marrying a mama's boy is a very critical mistake because they can always go back to their mamas. Son, your room is just the way it always was. Got your favorite pie cake whenever you want to get there. It is terrible marrying a mama's boy. Comments. It's my water break. Give me some feedback on mothers with their sons. What do you think of my analysis?
It's devastating. It's on target.
Any other concerns about mothers and their sons?
The boys will be boys is real bad.
Right.
That's exactly where you keep them as boys.
Right.
Where you teach them to be responsible, they will grow up to be men. Well, more apt to be anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of mothers.
You know, the shortage of men in the church, that can be corrected by taking our sons to church. The sons can stay home. It's optional to them, but not the daughters. In terms of playing outside, daughters in at a certain hour. The sons all night long. Double standards. Make the daughters stay, but not the sons. See, my point is, if black women, I'm coming right to you, if black women know what problems they have with their own black man, why don't they correct it with your son? See, if you know what the problems are with black men, your little son, that's somebody else's husband. All what you know needs to be done, put that into your son. Right, why perpetuate if you really love your sisters? If you really love your sisters, correct the problem with your son. Yes, sir.
Isn't that hard to do, though? Because the mother loves the child so much, and it hurts the mother to whip the child and see the child hurt, so the child will continue to rule.
But that's interesting. They love their daughters, too, but they whip their daughters.
You know, I've seen this phenomenon is that the mothers are also spoiling some daughters.
True, but you know who's spoiling some daughters? And we don't have enough of these men there to do it? Yeah. Fathers. Yeah. That's my baby. In other words, it's very interesting. See, when the father's there, see, it's something about a black man or a father seeing this male, his same size, sitting on his sofa, eating up all the food. Boy, you got to go. But see, his daughter can stay there as long as she wants. But see, the mother knows the daughter. And so the mother, you got to go too. See, mothers make the daughters go, and fathers make the sons go. But when the father's not there, there's nobody to make the son go. Yes, one more, then we got to go on. Yes, ma'am.
I also think it has something to do with the norms that are set in the system, too. And we try to emulate those as black people. Saying, for example, I was brought up on a farm and everybody worked together. But then in society now says the male has a role, the girl has a role. So the parents try to perpetuate that.
Correct. And what's sad about that is you can't fault the black man who you marry not wanting to wash dishes. He wasn't forced to wash dishes at home. So you can't fault him when he marries you. You have to teach him early. Teach him early. Next issue, female teachers. We're also very concerned about female teachers. Remember, the exact percentage is 83% in the elementary grades. The number of black children in public schools, 17%. But black children are 41% of all the special ed children. Now, 17 doesn't equal 41. LD, learning disabled, EMR, educable mentally retarded, BD, behavior disorder. It gets worse. If a black child is going to be labeled special ed, 85% of the time it's going to be a black boy. Why is it not 50-50 black boy, black girl? Well, the reason may not be with just black children, Bill Moyers and Patrick Monahan. It may be up here at the top. It may be that female teachers may not know that boys are different than girls. You all didn't know that, didn't you? That boys are different than girls. I only want the women to answer. The men know they're different. I want to now hear the women to share with us what are some of the differences between boys and girls in the classroom. Because only when you know what the differences are can you then change your methodology to meet the needs of their learning styles. Yes?
Boys are generally more active, more inquisitive.
Okay, so boys are more active. What else?
They're more physical.
More physical. Okay, more aggressive. What else? Come on now, you all got the boys explain what they do.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think the boys are more egotistical.
Okay, so a large ego.
Large
okay.
ego, and
okay.
you have to play
Got a
on
good
that.
group. Any others?
They're not quite as willing to please either as little girls.
Okay, okay, so less cooperative. And we just want to add a few more because of time. To reinforce, we found the boys are more aggressive, are more athletically inclined, have a shorter attention span, a slower maturation rate, as you said, are less cooperative, are larger than the girls, influenced more by their peer group, more advanced gross motor than fine motor, not as neat as girls, are louder than girls, like wearing hats on their heads, have a different walk, have a larger ego, and last but not least, play the dozens more than girls. Do you know how many teachers, especially white teachers, white female teachers, don't know what the dozens are, don't know what signifying is? Now remember, we live in a world controlled by men. Males want to find out who's the best, or as they say, who's the baddest. Now remember, in school the rule is you can't fight, but they still want to find out who's the best. They create a new game called dozens, signifying. It is a verbal word game of the most prized person in the black community. Now, who is the most prized person in the black community? Your mama. We're going to talk about your mama right now. I saw your mama on the railroad track, looked at her and said, ooh, get back. It's a verbal word game. Now, the game is designed, it's a verbal word game of the most prized person, your mama. Now, if you break down and start fighting, you getting kicked out of school, so I automatically win. If you break down and start crying, again, I automatically win. Now, before I go on, do you know how many black boys have been suspended or placed in special ed because they were playing the dozens? Do you know how many teachers don't understand those same two black boys who were playing the dozens, really getting down each other's mamas, were the best of friends 2 seconds later? They didn't understand the culture. Now, don't misquote me. I'm not condoning the dozens nor black English, but they both exist. And if you want to move a child from one to the other, it may not be what you say. It may be how you're saying it. In other words, black English. First day of school, 5-year-old girl walked into your classroom, speaking what she heard, black English. When you condemn the language, you've done more than condemn the language. You're now destroying the child's self-esteem. The language is legitimate, has different rules to it. It exists, legitimate rules to it. And if you want to move a child from black English to standardized English, you don't condemn him. You make him feel good where he is. If you went on Albert, there are some skills to playing the dozens. I'm a former teacher, and I had some very good dozen players. There are some skills to playing the dozens. First of all, you have to have an expanding vocabulary. You have to have the ability to make words rhyme. You have to have quick thinking skills. You have to be comfortable with public speaking. And I knew that. So I used to tell Willie, my best student, Willie, if you were that good playing the dozens, making words rhyme, vocabulary, all alike, I want you to be the MC at all my programs. I want you in my drama department or my spelling bee team. In other words, I stroked him. I made him feel good where he was. And then he was willing to give me those skills in my classroom. But the real issue is, do we let these boys know we respect their culture? Because if you condemn it, they will fight you every step of the way. And you know what else they will do? They will also fight you in what we call the showdown. The showdown between black boys and female teachers. You see, black boys don't know when they're men, and black men have not made it clear to them when they become men. So they think taking a female teacher one-on-one is going to make them a man, especially around 4th grade. From 4th grade on, they want to find out who's in charge of the class. It's called a showdown. There are numerous options in the showdown between a black male and a white and a female teacher. Showdown number 1. She says, sit down, very unassertively. Well, Willie may sit down, but it may be late on in the afternoon. Willie wins showdown number 1. Showdown number 2. She responds to Willie some of the time, but not all the time. She's inconsistent. Well, I believe Willie wins each one of those she does not respond to. Showdown number 3. She says, I'm going to suspend you or place you in special ed. Well, he may lose to the assistant principal or special ed placement, but he did not do what she said. He wins showdown number 3. Showdown number 4. She says very assertively, sit down now. You know how the good ones do it? They look at you. Strong eye contact. They look you back in line. And she wins showdown number 4. Showdown number 5. She responds to Willie each and every time. She's consistent, and she wins each one of those showdowns. Then the last one, a friend of mine in Chicago told me she had a boy who thought he was so bad, he was not going to stand up. He was going to run to class sitting down. He's going to make her nervous. He's going to look at her and smile at her. So every time Audrey looked at him, he looked back and smiled. But then Audrey would look back with the same strength and smile. This went on all day long. Willie looked and smiled. Audrey would look back and smile. At the end of class, so many words, Willie came to Audrey and said, okay, I understand that you are in charge of this class. But the reason is she's done 3 things well. She, first of all, loves him, and he knows that. She respects him, and he knows that. And she also respects his culture, and he knows that. Because of that, there is no showdown, because he knows that she is in charge of the class. What I'm getting at, to return back to this, if you know that boys have a shorter attention span, what should that do to your lesson? Make it shorter or make it more interesting? If you understand that boys are more advanced gross motor than fine motor, what should you allow more in your classroom? More hands-on learning activities. In other words, my point is, if you understand that boys have different learning styles, rather than taking them out of your class and put them in special ed, why don't you alter your learning styles, your methodology? But you know what's saying? Most principals know that 5% of their teachers make over 30% of the referrals. If that's the case, why remove the child? Why don't you remove the teacher? How is the child doing so well in 3rd grade with a good teacher and now labeled EMR in 4th grade? It may not be the child. It may be the teacher. It's really a shame we can't stay on this longer on learning styles. Hyperactivity, that's a value judgment. If you know what hyper is, God must have told you what normal is. Hyper is a value judgment. It may not be that blind boys are hyperactive. It may be the lesson plans are simply too slow. Think about that the next time you want to place a child in special ed. Some other issues. I want to wrap up with regards to what is the conspiracy to destroy black boys. I believe the conspiracy is made up of white male supremacy, institutional racism, lack of black male role models, the male socialization process, parental apathy and double standards, low teacher expectations, a female-designed classroom, a distorted media, and an influential peer group. In terms of the question of what is the conspiracy, I know you can't take all those down the way I gave them to you, so please read the book. I won't repeat them again, but those are the major factors that make up what is the conspiracy to destroy black boys. Male supremacy, institutional racism, lack of male role models, male socialization process, parental apathy, raising their daughters and loving their sons, low teacher expectations, a female-designed classroom, a distorted media, and an influential peer group. Now, what I want to begin to look at is, what can the home do to stop the conspiracy to destroy black boys? It's not enough to describe it. Remember, the book is called Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. I want to look at it from the home, from the classroom, from the community, and then we'll give you the Donna Willie theory, or the Donna Cathy theory and the Eddie Willie theory. In terms of the home, in order to stop this conspiracy, we must first of all become aware of it. I believe the first way to solve any problem is to know the problem exists, to study. We have got to study more. And then we, especially women, have got to admit that boys need role models, especially male role models. And after we admit that, then we need to identify some male role models that will play that kind of position with our boys. And please don't lie to me and say you don't know any. In other words, on your block, in your extended family, where you work at, please don't say you don't know at least one positive black male. In other words, just because the biological father is not there, does not mean there's not some other black men available. We believe in extended family concept. We also want you to set a contract on what this man will do with your son on an ongoing, regular basis. And for the fathers, please quit taking your sons only to the ball game and to the zoo. It's amazing. Fathers take their sons to the zoo and to a ball game. But when it's time to go to the grocery store or to the barbershop, go with your mama. In other words, I believe that black boys learn an awful lot by seeing you in very natural situations, at the oil change, at the barbershop, just talking smack on the street. So please quit thinking that you can only interact with your children in some child-centered activities. They need to see what you do on an ongoing, regular basis. We must also work on black boys' fine motor development. In other words, early on in kindergarten, we're labeling black boys as being behind because the girls work with crayons, pencils, and scissors. The boys have been working with trucks. We have to work on black boys' fine motor development. We also have to work on a non-sexist household. In other words, teach your son how to cook, how to sew, how to clean. We also recommend you teach your son sex education and before 12 years of age. The studies show we're teaching children sex ed after they've already started. It should be before, not after. They've already made a baby after 12 and 13. We have to work on that. We must also monitor the peer group. You know, good parents have always done a number of things well with the peer group. First of all, good parents know who their children's friends are. They invite them over to get to know them better. And many times parents program a peer group to make sure their child runs with the right group. My parents enrolled me on a track team. I had to run cross country, indoor, and outdoor track. Rather than running around a gang, they had me running around a track. My parents did that intentionally to make sure. Good parents also monitor television. TV cannot be turned on by itself. Quit blaming the television set. We must also look at us. And then last but not least, we must listen to our children. Many times they tell me, my parents don't listen to me. That's why the peer group is winning. The peer group listens. Many times we don't. You know, the average father only spends 7 minutes with his children. The average mother, 34 minutes. That's a tragedy. But if that's all you're spending, make sure it's quality time. Make sure you're listening to them. We recommend these strategies for the home. For the school, we recommend the following. First of all, again, we always believe in study. We must first of all become aware there's a conspiracy to destroy black boys. After that, we must increase male teachers. My first desire is to increase male staff. My second one would be those in the upper grades, at least for 1 year to teach in the lower grades. In other words, what I recommend is that we have more black men before 4th grade, or at least in the intermediate division. In addition to that, if we cannot get this, we want more black role models coming into the school. If we cannot get them on staff, the least we can do is invite black men in. I encourage black men to volunteer in your local school because the men are not there, so we need to have you there. In addition to that, we also want to change, some of the changes, the triangle, to change the methodology, to begin to use a right brain learning activities. In other words, more hands-on learning objects in terms of fine arts, artifacts, pictures, and the like. We also recommend that we emphasize academics over athletics. We must give more glory to academic achievement than we do athletic achievement. These are the strategies we recommend for the school. To one, study it, increase male teachers, increase role models, look at a right brain learning style, and emphasize academics over athletics. Lastly, for solutions, we also want to look at the community. The community has a program to destroy black boys. We must have one to protect and develop black boys. One program is the Boy Scouts. It's an excellent program. It teaches black boys skills. But the problem is the Boy Scout master may be homosexual, may not know black history. The Boy Scouts may be nothing more than a junior army. But it's an excellent program. It teaches black boys skills, but it may not do anything else. Another program is Big Brothers, an excellent concept. It gives black males a role model. But the big brother may be homosexual, may not know black history. If so, the conspiracy is going to continue. What we recommend is you blend Boy Scouts skills, blend Big Brothers role models into an African program called Simba, S-I-M-B-A, Simba. It's the African word for young lion. And we now have 17 SEMBA chapters across the country. These are programs where black men are not talking about the problem, they are working on it. These are black men who've organized themselves to work with black boys to teach them skills, give them a role model, teach them black culture, and the major objective to go through the rites of passage into manhood. At my church in Chicago, we have a SEMA program where in February during Black History Month or during December during Kwanzaa, we take our boys who've gone through our criteria and through a special ceremony called the rites of passage. I repeat, you have some black men talking about what they are going to do. You have some black men organized to begin to work on that kind of issue. We recommend SEMBA. It blends all three of those together. Closing point, and then we'll open up for some questions. Donna and Kathy, I mentioned at the very outset that one of every two husbands physically abuses his wife. Now, many thought the problem was only with the men who did the beating. There's more to it than that. You see, any respectable woman will make it very clear to her man, you put a hand on me, and either I'm leaving or you better not go to sleep. There are two kind of women in America, and they go by the names of Donna and Kathy. You see, I sincerely believe this. I believe that men know who to beat and who not to. I believe that. And I believe that men are not going to respect women until women, first of all, respect themselves. And there are two kind of women in America, Donna and Kathy. Now, Donna feels very good about herself. She would like to have a man, but she don't have to have one. I mean, the sun will still shine. God will still be first in her life. Donna wants one, but she ain't got to have one. But then you get Kathy, taking me your way, comes through the door with another woman, with a bottle, with a balled-up fist. All Kathy wants is a man, and a half a man will do. I want all the Catholics to raise their hands. You know, I've yet across the country see a sister admit to me that she's a Catholic. You know what they tell me? They say, Juwanza, well, I'm a Donna during the weekday, but I'm a Catholic on the weekend. Well, I'm Donna summertime and a Catholic the other hand. It's hard being a Donna in America when you have two women for every one man. It's easy to lower your standards. If you want to be a Catholic in America, the theory goes like this. For every sister we can get to quit acting like Catholics and to begin to act like Donna, what this means is less Catholics and more Donnas. As a result of having fewer Catholics and more Donnas, we will have fewer brothers taking advantage of women like Kathy and have to respect more women like Donna. I am tired of women always blaming the brothers. The last time I looked, you still determined who gets your phone number, who takes you out, and every step along the way. It's hard being a Donna in America. If you want to be a Donna, there may be some lonely Friday and Saturday nights. But if you believe in you, you'll have peace of mind. If you want to be a Donna in America, it means you go back to school, get off of welfare, learn you a skill for a career to take care of yourself. If you want to be a Donna in America, it means you will quit watching them soap operas all day long, especially all of my children, and begin to take care of your own. If you want to be a Donna in America, it means you will quit eating those cookies and chocolates all evening long. You know, the rumor is the older women get, the bigger you get. Watch what you eat and exercise. And then last but not least, if you want to be a Donna in America, you need to put God first in your life. You didn't know? It takes longer for boys to grow up, and some boys never grow up. But rather than marrying a boy as a Catholic making a mistake, we encourage you to wait. But while you're waiting, don't complain. Keep developing yourself. So when the brothers finally get ready, you'll be ready too. A good marriage still takes two and not one. Now, as you well know, when we used to end with the Donna Catholic theory, but the women got on our case in Juwanza. If you're going to talk about the conspiracy to destroy black boys, don't end it talking about us. End it where you started, with the brothers. So I now want to give you the Eddie Willie theory. Eddie is dedicated to my father. His name is Eddie, and I believe he's a very strong example of a black man. There are two kind of men in America, Eddie and Willie. Willie makes babies. Eddie takes care of them. In other words, Willie believes it's not the quality, it's the quantity. Willie has made a lot of babies. Eddie believes in not only taking care of them, he hugs them. He believes that men should hug their children, works with them on their homework. Eddie takes care of them. Willie makes them. Point number one. Point number two, Willie only works, and maybe not even then, outside the house. Eddie works inside and outside. In other words, Willie may cut the grass. He may rake leaves, but he definitely is not working inside the house because men work outside and women work inside, but not Eddie. Eddie believes in whatever it takes. Washing dishes, making dinner, whatever it takes. And then last but not least, Willie is very insecure. And so Willie verbally and physically abuses his woman, but not Eddie. Eddie is very secure. In other words, Eddie encourages a woman to go back to school, to get a promotion on her job. Eddie encourages his woman to go to church. You know what I even heard? Eddie goes to church with her. And the reason is Eddie is his wife's best friend. And because of that, he understands that putting his woman down is not the key. The key is feeling good about yourself. When you feel good about yourself, there's no need to put anybody down. I want all the Donnas and all the Eddies to stand up and give yourselves a very strong round of applause. Thank you very, very much.